Modern conflicts, such as in Ukraine, demonstrate how missiles are central to future warfare. From hypersonic weapons to precision-guided strikes, advances in missile technology are transforming how wars are fought and who holds the upper hand. So, as the global contest over developing missiles and missile defense systems heats up, we want to understand how these weapons change the way conflicts play out. I am Divi Gopalan, and you're watching Connected on TaiwanPlus. To discuss the evolution and challenges of missiles in modern warfare, we're joined by Matthew Bunn, Schlesinger Professor of the Practice of Energy, National Security, and Foreign Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's absolutely our pleasure. I'm going to just start with getting an overview from you on the importance of missiles in modern day warfare now.
Well, I think it's really a combination of missiles and drones, both airborne drones, undersea drones. We've seen in Ukraine, for example, that the Ukrainians have managed to essentially chase the Russian Black Sea fleet away from Ukraine's shores by the use of undersea drones, which could also play a huge role in a battle in the Taiwan Strait should one occur. Missiles are definitely important. We've seen them used between Israel and Iran. We've seen a huge Russian attacks, both with drones and missiles on Ukraine, some Ukrainian attacks with missiles and with drones on Russia as well. I think all of those technologies are likely to be important for Taiwan's defense.
I want to lift the lid on some of those conflicts you've outlined there to understand how what role missiles play. But before we go into that, how would you say the advancements we've seen perhaps over the past 2 decades in missile technology changed the nature of modern warfare?
Well, we've had ballistic missiles for a long time. Countries are using them more for conventional attacks than they have before. Cruise missiles have become much more important. The missiles have become somewhat more accurate over time, although if you only have inertial guidance, as most ballistic missiles do, it's still, quite difficult to be very accurate at long distance, say 1,000 kilometers or more. And so often missiles are used more as terror weapons to hit a broad area than you really need the precision strike to hit, for example, a particular electrical substation or a particular building at a military base that you might want to attack. So the Iranian attacks on Israel, for example, didn't actually succeed in destroying any important strategic targets in Israel, partly because of the missile defense and partly because of the inaccuracy of the missiles.
And on the topic of terror attacks, let's take the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea as an example. Houthi missile strikes cost the U.S. tens of millions of dollars to intercept. And by targeting shipping, they in turn strike the global economy. So what missiles do they use, and what does this say about how the balance of power can be altered?
The Houthis' missiles are coming from Iran, so the Houthis wouldn't be able to develop the kinds of missiles that they have without having them provided by the Iranians. But I do think if you think about Taiwan's security, the Chinese have a huge force of ballistic missiles, both conventionally armed ballistic missiles, and of course they have nuclear missiles as well. And I think that then poses a threat to, for example, American aircraft carriers that would be a key part of American participation in such a conflict, and to bases both in Taiwan, Taiwan's own defenses, and other countries that, for example, aircraft might be operating out of, or ports that ships might be operating out of. By the same token, however, any effort to invade across the Taiwan Strait, nobody's ever done an amphibious invasion over 100 miles of open ocean. That force would be extremely vulnerable to attack by missiles, by drones, by a variety of aircraft, and by other means during the course of that trip.
So staying on this part of the world, China has hundreds of ballistic missiles aimed at Taiwan. Yeah. So in that sense, given Taiwan's size and perhaps the level of its defense systems, its current level of defense systems, what strategy should Taiwan be thinking about?
Well, I definitely think that having greater investment in integrated air and missile defense is probably a good idea. One of the things many countries are struggling with right now is how to put adequate air and missile defenses in place. There's only a few companies that make the best ones. The interceptors, people have to wait in line for interceptors at this point because the industrial capacity to churn them out at the level that people want them is not yet there. So a substantial investment in that, but I think also the combination of its own missiles and drones and other means to attack an invasion force could make Taiwan a real porcupine that would be very difficult for China to swallow, to increase the cost so that China would not really consider actually taking that action.
I just want to pull up this graphic here and take a look at how air defense systems detect, track, and intercept aerial threats. These systems integrate radar technology, surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, and command control centers to safeguard national security and crucial infrastructure. Now, let's take a look at some of the most prominent air defense systems in the world. The U.S. has its Advanced Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, and Patriot PAC PAC-3, and has partnered with Israel on David Sling. Now, this is followed by Israel's Iron Dome and Barak 8, which is co-developed with India. Russia operates different generations of surface-to-air systems, the S-300, 400, and 500, and inspired by Russia's S-300, China's developed its long-range Hongqi, or HQ-9 system. And finally, we have the French-Italian joint venture Aster 30 SAMP-T, which is medium range and brings what's seen as mobile and adaptable defense. Now, if we break down some of this or have a look at some of these systems separately, missile defense systems like the THAAD and Patriot have been deployed globally. And in South Korea in particular, the THAAD system is in place. How much of it is a defense against North Korea's missile systems currently, or perhaps even China's, if it comes to that?
So North Korea is the primary purpose of the THAAD system in South Korea, although China worried that it might affect its deterrent by possibly the radars being able to observe the deployment of reentry vehicles and decoys from Chinese missiles to assist U.S. homeland missile defenses. I think that's really not a very serious threat to the Chinese deterrent. I do want to make a distinction between missile defenses for intercontinental missiles, land-based ones, intercontinental ballistic missiles, sea-based ones, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, versus the kinds of regional defenses that you were just describing in your graphics. The regional defenses are technically feasible. They exist now. They have proven their value in the interactions between Russia and Ukraine, between Israel and Iran, Most of the missiles arriving in Ukraine are intercepted. Most of the missiles that arrived in Israel are intercepted, but the resources of interceptors are limited. And so that's the scramble now, is to find more interceptors, and also to judge, as a missile is coming in, what is it going to hit? If it's just going to hit open countryside, Israel doesn't bother to intercept it, for example. The Iron Dome is really a different kettle of fish. It's for intercepting very short-range rockets, as might be fired by the Palestinians from Gaza. And that's quite different from trying to intercept an intermediate range ballistic missile coming all the way from Iran, which would be the job of Arrow, for example, in Israel, or THAAD system. The intercontinental ones pose a much harder problem. The reentry vehicles separate from the missiles, so the target is small, the distances are long, and for most of their flight, they're flying through space where heavy things like a warhead and light things like a decoy that just looks just like the warhead but is empty travel in exactly the same way through space. And so the ability to defeat a defense system is much greater for that intercontinental mission. So that's what the United States is trying to do with the Golden Dome system that President Trump announced. But so far, Golden Dome is an idea and a research program. It's not an actual defense in place.
Can you give us a little bit more context into the Golden Dome system that's being announced, and how that is, from what we know so far, how that's expected to work, and who it's primarily expected to fend off?
Well, explaining what President Trump wants is not ever the easiest thing to do. If you read his executive order on Golden Dome, it claims that Golden Dome is going to do everything, and it's not going to be able to do that. It claims that it's going to be able to protect the whole American population against ballistic missiles, against aircraft, against hypersonic missiles, against cruise missiles. We have no ability to defend against most of those things. Technologically, we don't have the technology, we don't have the money. And hypersonic missiles in particular pose new defense challenges because they can maneuver. With a ballistic missile, it's flying on one course through space, and you know where it's going to be in 10 minutes' time. And you can fire your interceptor to the place it's going to be rather than the place it is now. Whereas a hypersonic missile can change course and be someplace else than you were expecting it to be. And that makes the defense problem much, much more difficult. You need faster, more agile interceptors, probably more of them. What would be feasible for Golden Dome or something like it would be to intercept a portion of the incoming missiles, to make a large-scale attack, for example, on U.S. nuclear forces more complicated, more uncertain. But it's just not feasible, given that one bomb can destroy an entire city, as we saw tragically at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's just not feasible to provide the American people with a real defense against nuclear attack. We have to rely, unfortunately, on nuclear deterrence for that purpose, the threat of striking back if anyone does attack. So the basic security against nuclear weapons is don't nuke me or I'll nuke you for the United States. And then for American allies, we have what's known as extended deterrence, where we provide both conventional protection, but in the event of nuclear attack, nuclear protection as well to American allies.
And going back to hypersonics, who currently has hypersonic missiles that can be used? And a number of countries, I believe, are developing their own hypersonic missiles. Is that shaping the new, kind of the next era of warfare?
Well, I think shaping the next era of warfare would be a little bit of hype. They don't deliver any more explosive than a normal missile. They're just harder to defend against. Now, the other problem with hypersonics is how do you define what counts as a hypersonic missile? All ballistic missiles of any reasonable range are flying at a speed that would be defined as hypersonic. When people talk about hypersonic missiles, they mean ballistic missiles that can maneuver in space. And then there's the question of, well, how much can they maneuver? How fast can they maneuver? And so on. The United States has been testing various maneuverable reentry vehicles for decades, but is now working on more advanced hypersonic systems. Russia has a hypersonic system deployed, although some of them have been intercepted in the attacks on Ukraine. China is working on hypersonic systems. India is working on hypersonic systems. Iran claims to be testing a hypersonic system. Even North Korea claims to be testing a hypersonic system. I imagine those are more basic and primitive hypersonic systems than some of the ones being developed by the larger powers.